to the movie Pit Boils and Ghouls. It's your old friend Dr. Ghoulyula, back from the crypt to dissect another bloody masterpiece of macabre cinema. Tonight we're sinking our fangs into Final Destination 2, that delightfully fucked up sequel that cranked the death machine into overdrive. When this little gem crashed into theaters back in 2003, it proved that sometimes the sequel can be just as entertaining as the original. What makes this film special isn't just the parade of increasingly absurd deaths, though holy shit, they are spectacular, but how it balances genuine tension with dark humor that'll have you laughing your ass off while covering your eyes. Death has never been so goddamn creative or perversely entertaining. Did you know that in the average horror sequel, audience expectations for body count increased by about 40%? It's true, Americans don't just want death in their horror films, they demand it to be more elaborate, more shocking, more impossible to avoid. And that right there is the genius of Final Destination 2. A film that uses our obsession with cheating death as a fucking mirror to American culture itself. Have you ever wondered why we're so goddamn captivated by watching characters attempt to outrun their inevitable demise? Maybe it's because deep down, we're all desperately clinging to the illusion of control in our chaotic lives. We drive our SUVs, secure our homes, schedule our days down to the minute, all under the delusion that we're somehow in charge of our destiny. Final Destination 2 strips that comforting bullshit away with sadistic glee. Death isn't just coming for these characters. It's coming through the most mundane objects in American life. Kitchen appliances, fire escapes, fast food, even the highways we trust to get us safely from point A to point B. The film transforms our everyday world into an elaborate mousetrap, showing that all our safety measures and precautions are just temporary delays in death's grand motherfucking design. What makes the sequel particularly fascinating is how it plays with fate versus free will. These characters saved from a highway pileup believe they've taken control of their destiny, only to discover they're still mere pawns in death's cosmic chess game. It's a perfect metaphor for American exceptionalism, that deeply held belief that somehow we can outsmart the inevitable that awaits us all. Final Destination 2 dropped into theaters in 2003, building on the surprise success of the original film, which had turned a modest budget into a $112 million international hit. New Line Cinema knew they had a potential franchise on their hands, but faced an immediate challenge when the original creative team of James Wong and Glenn Morgan declined to return, having committed to other projects. The studio didn't fuck around, quickly bringing in David R. Ellis, a seasoned stunt coordinator and second unit director, to helm the sequel. Ellis brought a different energy to the production, embracing the inherent dark humor that lurked beneath the surface of the original's premise. Writers Eric Bress and J. Mackie Gruber were tasked with expanding the mythology while still delivering the gruesome goods fans expected. We wanted to take what the first film did effectively and add layers that would come out through the characters, Bress explained. When we first started writing this, we were trying to think, how can we make Death just a total badass? Their early drafts were apparently so fucking extreme they had to be reined in. Like its predecessor, filming took place primarily in Vancouver and across British Columbia. The infamous highway pileup sequence was shot on British Columbia Highway 19, while the Plaza of Nations doubled as Ellis Medical Complex. For the lake sequence, the crew faced truly brutal conditions at Okanagan Lake, with actors AJ Cook and Michael Landis performing their own underwater stunts in water that was a ball-shriveling 37 degrees. What's interesting about Final Destination 2 is that the production team actively avoided simply rehashing the original formula. While the first film followed a linear path of death claiming victims in the order they would have died on Flight 180, the sequel introduced a reverse order concept and complex interconnections between the survivors of the first film and the new cast, creating what producer Craig Perry called a butterfly effect through the mythology. Despite Devon Sawa's Alex Browning being killed off-screen, Ali Larter returned as Clear Rivers, providing a crucial connective tissue between the films. The producers were adamant that this wasn't just a cash grab sequel, but an opportunity to deepen the franchise's twisted mythology of fate, death, and our futile attempts to cheat the inevitable. So Final Destination 2 kicks off 1 year after the explosion of Flight 180, with college student Kimberly Corman heading to Daytona Beach with her friends for spring fucking break. As they're about to enter Route 23, Kimberly has a horrific premonition of a massive highway pileup, triggered by a logging truck. In her vision, logs come crashing through windshields, cars flip and explode, and it's just absolute carnage, the kind of shit that makes you never want to drive behind a logging truck again. Acting on her vision, Kimberly blocks the entrance ramp with her car, preventing 8 strangers from entering the highway. Lottery winner Evan Lewis, mother Nora Carpenter, and her teenage son Tim, businesswoman Kat Jennings, stoner Rory Peters, pregnant Isabella Hudson, high school teacher Eugene Dix, and state trooper Thomas Burke. While Burke is questioning her, the pileup happens exactly as she foresaw, but Death isn't happy about being cheated, and a car carrier smashes into Kimberly's vehicle, killing her 3 friends instantly while she survives. What makes this sequel so goddamn clever is how it expands the mythology established in the first film. After Evan dies in a gruesome apartment fire accident, Kimberly seeks out Clear Rivers, the last survivor from the original film who's now voluntarily committed herself to a psychiatric ward. Clear drops 2 bombshells. Death is now hunting them in reverse order from how they would have died on the highway, and there's an even more twisted connection. Each of them was supposed to die in previous incidents, but was saved because of the Flight 180 survivors' deaths. This creates a motherfucking labyrinth of causality where Death is basically cleaning up loose ends from its previous design. We learned that Officer Burke would have been killed by a criminal who instead died in the Flight 180 explosion. Eugene would have been stabbed by a student who died on a school bus that a Flight 180 survivor was supposed to teach. It's like Death is a cosmic accounting ledger, and it's balancing the books. Clear tells Kimberly to look for signs of Death's approach, but these warnings often appear too late or are misinterpreted, leading to a series of spectacularly grisly deaths. The group tries to protect pregnant Isabella, believing her unborn child, New Life, might break Death's cycle. But in the film's devious twist, Isabella was never meant to die on the highway at all, making their efforts completely fucking pointless. The brilliance of this reverse order concept is that it creates tension not just from wondering who will die next, but how these elaborate Rube Goldberg-style death traps will unfold. Death becomes a sort of sick artist, turning everyday objects like barbecue grills, plate glass windows, and even dental equipment into instruments of doom. By the film's end, Kimberly realizes the only way to defeat Death is through sacrifice and rebirth, driving a van into a lake and being resuscitated, literally creating new life that can break the cycle. Until, of course, the final scene reminds us that Death is a persistent son of a bitch who always gets the last laugh. Let's talk about the cast of Final Destination 2, which brings together a solid ensemble that perfectly walks the line between genuine terror and oh shit, this is darkly funny reactions to their impending doom. AJ Cook absolutely fucking nails it as Kimberly Corman. Unlike many horror protagonists who make you want to scream at the screen for their stupidity, Cook gives us a character with actual brain cells to rub together. Her transformation from carefree college student to paranoid death escaper feels authentic. Cook's wide-eyed panic during the highway premonition scene sets the tone early, but she manages to avoid the trap of playing one-note hysteria throughout the film. Instead, she gives Kimberly legitimate agency and determination, especially in scenes where she's trying to convince others they're fucked unless they listen to her. Larter returns as Clear Rivers, and holy shit, what a difference a movie makes. Gone is the vulnerable final girl from the original. In her place is a hardened, institutionalized woman who's essentially become Death's reluctant expert. Larter brings a perfect cynical edge to every line reading, especially when explaining the rules to the newbies. You can't cheat Death, there are no shortcuts or loopholes. You can't turn back time. Her delivery is so matter-of-fact about their impending demise that it borders on darkly comedic. Michael Landis brings a grounded presence as Officer Burke, our skeptic-turned-believer. His transition from by-the-book cop to holy fuck death is real happens gradually and believably. Landis delivers earnest concern without crossing into cheesy territory, which is harder than it looks in a film where people are getting decapitated by elevator doors. The supporting cast shines too. Jonathan Cherry as Stone Rory gives us some of the film's best comic relief moments. That's fucking crazy, right? Reactions perfectly capture how most of us would respond to this insane situation. T.C. Carson as Eugene brings intellectual gravitas but isn't afraid to show legitimate terror when shit hits the fan. Keegan Connor Tracy turns what could have been a one-dimensional bitch character into someone whose sharp-tongued cynicism feels like a reasonable defense mechanism. What makes this cast work so well together is their ability to react authentically to increasingly absurd situations. When plate glass decapitates someone, they don't just scream, they process the horror with a mixture of disgust, shock, and sometimes inappropriate laughter that feels genuine to how real people cope with trauma. It's this balance that elevates Final Destination 2 above standard horror fare and makes the audience both terrified and entertained as Death comes collecting. If the original Final Destination introduced us to Death's sadistic game, the sequel gives Death a fucking promotion to executive prank planner. Final Destination 2 cranks the dark humor dial to 11, embracing its absurdity with a shit-eating grin that says, yeah, we know exactly what kind of movie this is. The sequel brilliantly understands that audiences coming back for seconds weren't looking for subtle psychological horror. They wanted more elaborate, batshit crazy death sequences, and boy does the film deliver. There's something deliciously perverse about how the sequel transforms everyday objects into instruments of hilarious destruction. A simple plate of spaghetti becomes an omen of impending doom. A dentist's office, already a place of anxiety, becomes a chamber of horrors. And don't get me started on that motherfucking log truck, which has single-handedly made an entire generation of drivers paranoid on highways. What makes the comedy work is the film's complete self-awareness. Director David R. Ellis knows exactly when to wink at the audience. The prolonged setups for each death are like watching an elaborate Rube Goldberg machine, where the punchline is always someone dying spectacularly. Take the barbecue scene. The way the camera lovingly tracks every potential hazard, making us guess which one will be the killer, is both suspenseful and darkly funny. The film also deliberately plays with fake-outs in a way the original never did. That pigeon hitting the glass instead of Tim, pure comic misdirection before the actual death. These moments create a rhythm of tension, relief, then shock that's as much comedy as it is horror. By the early 2000s, horror was becoming increasingly self-referential, but Final Destination 2 avoids the snarky postmodernism of Scream. Instead, it offers a type of dark humor that comes from acknowledging the ridiculous premise and taking it to its logical extreme. The characters even get in on the joke, with Rory's "I was supposed to die" right back there, delivered with the perfect mix of disbelief and absurdist acceptance. This humor works because underneath it all, the film taps into very real anxieties. We laugh because the alternative is admitting how fucking terrified we are that death could be lurking in the most mundane places. Our cars, kitchens, and yes, even our dentist waiting rooms. The death sequences in Final Destination 2 aren't just kill scenes, they're elaborate fucking masterpieces of paranoid tension. What makes this film stand tall in the horror pantheon is how it transforms everyday objects into instruments of destruction, with a sick attention to detail that would make even Jigsaw nod in approval. Let's start with Tim's plate glass death. The setup is brilliant, pigeons gathering ominously, the dentist's office already making us squirm, and then that magnificent fake out with the bird hitting the window. Just when you think the danger's past, wham! A massive pane of glass slides off a construction truck and liquefies the poor kid. It's the ultimate fuck you from death itself, turning a dental checkup into a sidewalk slaughterhouse. Then there's Nora's elevator decapitation. Jesus fucking Christ. The way the film builds tension with her hair getting caught in those coat hooks, the doors malfunctioning, the scarf tightening, it's a symphony of impending doom. By the time her head pops off like a champagne cork, you're almost relieved the tension is over, until you realize you just witnessed the world's most aggressive haircut. What about Evan's ladder impalement in his apartment? The scene plays with fire hazards, slippery floors, and spaghetti before delivering its brutal punchline. The camera lingers on each potential threat, the tea kettle, the stove flames, the bath water, making us participate in spotting death traps that might be in our own fucking homes. These sequences tap into our deepest paranoid anxieties. After watching, you'll never look at a logging truck the same way again. You'll eye your toaster with suspicion. You'll take the stairs instead of the elevator. The true genius of Final Destination 2 is making us realize that death isn't some hooded figure with a scythe. It's the barbecue grill at your family cookout, the airbag in your car, or the fire escape that's supposed to save your life. The film creates genuine suspense by making mundane objects sinister. That's the terrifying brilliance here. Death doesn't need supernatural powers when a well-placed pigeons, a faulty elevator, or a slippery floor will do the job just fine. We're surrounded by potential killers disguised as everyday conveniences, and Final Destination 2 never lets us forget it. When it comes to visual effects and cinematography, Final Destination 2 elevates what could have been standard horror fare into something genuinely impressive. The highway pileup sequence is a fucking masterclass in controlled chaos. What makes it so effective isn't just the spectacle, it's the methodical buildup. The way the camera lingers on each vehicle just long enough for us to register the horror before moving to the next catastrophe. Digital Dimension handled the visual effects, and those CG logs deserve their own goddamn Oscar. They studied the physics of actual Douglas fir logs, their weight, density, and how they behave when flung from a truck at highway speeds. The attention to detail is insane. When a real log is dropped from a truck, it bounces maybe an inch, not exactly the skull-crushing death machine the script required. The VFX team had to find the perfect balance between physics and holy shit, that log just decapitated someone. What's most impressive is how seamlessly the practical and digital effects blend together. For every CG log smashing through a windshield, there's a practical effect of shattered glass and twisted metal. The live cast of actors for death scenes give everything the extra layer of gruesome authenticity that CGI alone can't achieve. The cinematography brilliantly employs what I call death signals, subtle visual cues that something terrible is about to happen. Notice how before each death, the camera often pans across innocent objects that will become murder weapons. There's always a moment of visual foreshadowing, the reflection in glass, the shadow on the wall, the focus pulled to something seemingly insignificant. The color palette deserves appreciation too. The film has this slightly desaturated look during normal scenes, but death sequences pop with vivid reds and harsh lighting. The highway scene uses natural daylight to make everything brutally visible, no shadows to hide the carnage, while later deaths employ more stylized lighting that builds dread before the kill. What's particularly effective is how director David R. Ellis uses wide shots to establish safety, then suffocating close-ups when death closes in. When Nora steps into that elevator, the camera gradually tightens around her as her options for escape diminish. The visual language consistently communicates that there's no escape from death's design, even before the characters fully understand it themselves. David R. Ellis's background as a stunt coordinator and second unit director brings a distinct energy to Final Destination 2 that many horror directors couldn't replicate with twice the budget. The man clearly understands how to choreograph chaos, and it shows in every meticulously planned death sequence. Unlike directors who just point and shoot, Ellis constructs these elaborate Rube Goldberg murder machines with the precision of someone who spent decades making dangerous shit look good on camera. The pacing of this film is tight as fuck. Where the original Final Destination occasionally dragged between kills, the sequel knows exactly when to hit the gas. Ellis gives us just enough character development to make us give a shit, then gets down to the bloody business we came for. It's like he's got an internal stopwatch that alerts him when too many minutes have passed without someone getting impaled, crushed, or dismembered. What's impressive is how Ellis maintains tension even during exposition dumps. When the survivors gather at Burke's apartment to discuss Death's design, it could have been boring as hell. Instead, he keeps the camera moving, plays with depth of field, and plants visual hints of looming danger that keep us on edge even when characters are just talking. Every wineglass, sharp object, or electrical appliance becomes a potential murder weapon, and Ellis makes sure we notice them all. The film structure is also surprisingly clever for a mid-2000s horror sequel. The first act establishes the rules. The second twists them with the revelation about the reverse death order, and the third throws in another curveball with Isabella's baby. Just when we think we understand the pattern, Ellis pulls the rug out from under us. Unlike many horror sequels from the 90s and early 2000s that were content to lazily rehash their predecessors, Final Destination 2 actually expands the mythology in interesting ways. Ellis also knows when to let moments breathe. The highway pileup isn't just a chaotic mess of crashes, there's a rhythm to it, with moments of false safety before the next wave of destruction hits. This same principle applies throughout. Ellis builds tension through anticipation rather than just jump scares. He lets us see the dominoes being set up before they start falling, which makes the inevitable bloodbath all the more satisfying when it comes. Holy shit, the sound design in Final Destination 2 might be the most underrated component of the entire film. Those subtle audio cues that signal death's presence, a faint whisper of wind, creaking metal, or that distinctive whooshing sound, create more tension than a dozen fucking jump scares ever could. It's like death has its own musical theme that plays whenever it's about to fuck someone up. And you can't help but clench your ass cheeks when you hear it. The musical score by Shirley Walker deserves serious props too. Walker, who scored the first film, returns with a soundtrack that knows exactly when to ramp up and when to shut the fuck up. During the elaborate death sequences, the music builds and swells alongside the increasing danger, only to cut out entirely at the moment of death for maximum impact. That sudden silence right before someone gets decapitated or impaled, that's some genius level shit right there. What's particularly effective is how everyday sounds become ominous. The normal squeak of elevator doors, the innocent sizzle of a barbecue, or the mundane sound of a dentist drill, all transformed into harbingers of doom. The film creates a paranoid soundscape where literally any noise could be the precursor to your gruesome demise. The highway pileup sequence is a masterclass in audio design. The cacophony of screeching tires, shattering glass, and crunching metal is choreographed like a grotesque symphony. When that logging truck loses its load, the thunderous sound of those massive logs bouncing down the highway creates genuine dread that visual effects alone couldn't achieve. Even more impressive is how the sound design manipulates time during death sequences, stretching moments with slow-motion audio effects or compressing them with sudden jarring cuts. It's like death is a sick motherfucker who enjoys playing with the audio mixing board while orchestrating these elaborate kills. Beneath its blood-soaked exterior, Final Destination 2 delivers a surprisingly sharp critique of American values and our fucked-up relationship with mortality. The film ruthlessly exposes our culture's desperate denial of death, the ultimate American delusion that with enough money, technology, or sheer willpower, we can somehow cheat the inevitable. Look at these characters. They're the perfect cross-section of American archetypes. The lottery winner, the businesswoman, the cop, the teacher, the pregnant woman chasing the American dream. They all believe they're entitled to long, prosperous lives because that's what our society promises. The American mythology tells us we control our destinies through hard work and good choices, but Final Destination 2 laughs in the face of that bullshit. Death doesn't give a fuck about your 401k or your college fund. The highway pileup that kicks off the movie brilliantly symbolizes our illusion of control. These characters are literally on the American highway, that quintessential symbol of freedom and mobility when chaos erupts. They're in their cars, those private bubbles of perceived safety, surrounded by airbags and safety features, when logs come crashing through windshields like death giving the middle finger to our safety precautions. Even more telling is how these survivors respond to their brush with mortality. They immediately try to reassert control, through rules, through systems, through fucking bizarre superstitions. They're so goddamn American in their approach, if we just figure out the pattern, we can beat this thing. It's the same mentality that drives our consumer culture. Buy this product, follow this diet, take this pill, and you'll live forever. The most cutting critique comes in how the characters try to cheat death through increasingly elaborate schemes. Isn't that just the American way? Instead of accepting mortality, we'll throw every technological advancement, every medical procedure, every drop of Botox at the problem. The film mocks our desperate attempts to stay young, stay relevant, stay alive, no matter the cost. What makes Final Destination 2 so fucking effective is that it forces us to confront the randomness that our ordered society tries to deny. Death isn't just coming for these characters, it's coming for all of us, and no amount of planning, wealth, or status can change that fundamental truth. The futility of their struggle mirrors our own collective denial, a particularly American delusion that with enough effort, even death itself can be conquered. Final Destination 2 established itself as a pivotal cornerstone in early 2000s horror. While the original film introduced the concept, the sequel's outrageous death sequences elevated the franchise into a cultural phenomenon that horror fans still reference with morbid glee 2 decades later. The movie's influence on subsequent horror can't be overstated. It popularized what critics now call Rube Goldberg horror. Those meticulously choreographed death sequences where everyday objects become instruments of elaborate fatality. Every fucking film that features intricate multi-step death traps owes a debt to what Final Destination 2 perfected. What's remarkable is how the franchise evolved after this installment. Each subsequent sequel tried desperately to outdo the increasingly absurd death sequences, but most horror fans agree that Final Destination 2 struck the perfect balance between the genuinely horrifying and the darkly comedic. That goddamn log truck scene alone has made countless drivers nervously change lanes when they see logging vehicles on the highway, a testament to the film's lasting psychological impact. Beyond its own franchise, you can see the film's DNA in everything from the later Saw movies to countless imitators who recognize that audiences crave these orchestrated death sequences. The film understood something primal about modern horror audiences. We don't just want to see death, we want to see the ridiculous, almost mathematical precision of fate working through mundane objects. What's most impressive about the film's legacy is how it's maintained relevance through meme culture. That plate glass scene, the elevator decapitation, they've been referenced, parodied, and homaged in everything from Family Guy to actual workplace safety videos. Final Destination 2 didn't just influence horror cinema, it fundamentally changed how a generation processes and jokes about mortality. 20 years later, whenever someone says, I have a bad feeling about this, there's a good chance they're channeling the paranoid spirit of this motherfucking masterpiece of mayhem. Let's be real here. Final Destination 2 isn't going to win any fucking Academy Awards, but that was never the point. What we have is a film that understands exactly what it is and delivers on its promises with gleeful abandon. The good? Those death sequences are still some of the most creative in horror history. That highway pileup alone deserves a standing ovation for its meticulous construction and execution. It's a goddamn symphony of chaos that makes you forget you're watching a mid-budget horror sequel. The filmmakers looked at normal, everyday objects, logs, barbecue grills, plate glass windows, and thought, how can we turn these innocent items into instruments of spectacular death? That's the kind of sick creativity that elevates genre films. The film's dark humor hits just right too. While the original played things relatively straight, the sequel embraces gallows humor with lines like, I've got an idea, why don't we just throw ourselves into traffic? There's a self-awareness here that's refreshing as hell in a genre that often takes itself too seriously. But let's not pretend this movie doesn't have issues. The characters are about as deep as a puddle in the Mojave. Outside of Kimberly and Claire, most of these fuckers exist solely to die in spectacular fashion. The plot also relies on some convenient bullshit to keep things moving. Sudden premonitions appear whenever the script needs them, and the rules of death's design change more frequently than I change my underwear. What's remarkable, though, is that none of that really matters. Final Destination 2 succeeds precisely because it prioritizes what audiences aim for, watching pretty 20-somethings die in increasingly absurd ways while trying to outrun the inevitable. Under all that blood and guts, there's actually surprisingly thoughtful meditation on fate, mortality, and our desperate attempts to control the uncontrollable. The film's central message, that death is coming for all of us, regardless of our plans, hits harder than you'd expect from a movie where someone gets bisected by barbed wire. When all the blood is spilled and the last death rattle fades, Final Destination 2 earns a solid 7 out of 10 stars in my book. This sequel manages to do what so many horror follow-ups fail at. It takes the original concept and cranks that motherfucker up to 11 without losing what made the first film work. Let's appreciate what this movie gets right. The death sequences are fucking masterpieces of suspense and payoff. That highway pileup stands as one of the most meticulously orchestrated disaster sequences of the early 2000s. David R. Ellis deserves serious props for creating tension from everyday objects, elevators, plate glass, even a goddamn pigeon, turning the mundane into murder weapons with a showman's flair. Final Destination 2 proves that sometimes, the second time's the charm. Even when that charm comes with dismemberment, decapitation, and a healthy dose of existential dread. Well, boils and ghouls, that wraps up our autopsy of Final Destination 2. Despite its flaws, this worthy little slice of early 2000s horror delivers exactly what it fucking promises. Inventive death scenes that'll make you laugh 1 second and wince the next. It's not trying to win Oscars, it's trying to entertain you while making you paranoid about every goddamn object in your vicinity. What we've got here is a solid 7 out of 10 stars. A sequel that understood the assignment and gleefully cranked up both the gore and the giggles. In a 90s and early 2000s landscape of shitty horror follow-ups, this one stands tall like a middle finger to death itself. If you enjoyed this dissection, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the Movie Pit, and for fuck's sake, ring that notification bell. Unless you're worried it might somehow trigger a Rube Goldberg sequence ending with your untimely demise. This is Dr. Ghoulyula, reminding you that in the grand scheme of things, we're all just waiting our turn in death's design. Pleasant nightmares. And as always, till next time, kiddies.